Hello friends, this particular video will be very important in context to TypeScript. In this particular video I will be talking about two important concepts that makes TypeScript so different from JavaScript, and that is the concept of class as well as the concept of interface along with class. This what the reason why TypeScript is so different from JavaScript, because TypeScript makes use of full object-oriented programming paradigm. So through this particular video you will be able to understand how a class and an interface is going to differ. As you can understand over here, I have used the implement keyword, so that means I am going to use inheritance inside TypeScript. So after the end of this video you will be fully confident about how to implement OOPs inside TypeScript. So let's start first with the concept of class alone. Well, I have a HTML page over here which is going to take input from the user and will pass on to the TypeScript. Inside the TypeScript I have created one class. The class has got three properties or member variable. Couple of them are string and the other one is integer type, a number. You need to have a constructor so that you can create an instance of a class, and this constructor is just going to initialize a blank value to these properties. I have a method inside the class whose role is to take the input from the user and will store them in the respective parameter and then assign them to the class properties. So that's what the role of this input, which is like a setter function. Similarly, I also have a getter function in the form of display who is going to display me a string, but it's not just a string, rather it has got an HTML code embedded inside, and that's the reason why I'm using string interpolation operator. So here I'm going to display the data in the form of a Bootstrap CRUD, where it will be showing you the card, so not CRUD, it's card. It will be showing the data that the user has given in the form of name, in the form of email, and in the form of age that has been stored in the respective variable right over here. That's what we are going to display in the form of in string interpolation, that we are going to do it over here, right? This is how the structure of the class goes. A pretty straightforward simple class. If you are well versed with object-oriented programming, you are very familiar with the structure. Nothing extraordinary over here. Apart from that, I also have got a document who is going to receive the data. So here is the form which the user will fill up and then will click on the submit button. As the user does that, it is going to give a call to the main.ts, which is my module. So main.ts will give a call right over here. I mean, this particular file will come and control will come over here and will assign the data inside my DOM content loaded. As we know very well, the DOM content loaded works immediately when the browser gets loaded on the main memory. As we can see over here, I have a form. The form name is called user form, so I will be picking up the data from the respective DOM elements. The first is the name, the second one is the email, and the third one is the age. So once the user clicks on submit button, eventually all these data in the form of form will pass on to my document. So right over here I have identified that I have got one HTML form element, and the name of the form is user form, as we just now saw over here. The similar structure which I am explaining over here, the same structure which I will follow right over here as well. Okay, there is no difference between the HTML part. The main difference comes in the form of TypeScript OOPs structure. So whatever I am saying over here, the similar thing will be right over here as well. So first what I am doing is that I am identifying the DOM element, and it is of the HTML form element, and as you can see, it's a typecasting has been done over here. So I'm telling that I have a form by the name called user form. So assign the reference to this particular variable over here. Got it? And now I also have one div tag which is outside the DOM element, and for that reason I'm unable to use the form, rather I'm using get element by id. Since this div is outside the form ends over here. Had this div been inside, I could have used the form over here as well, but since it is outside the div, so I'm using document.getElementById, and I'm telling that this is basically a div tag. So clearly understandable that in context to TypeScript, if you are taking input from the user, well, usually I have seen a lot of videos where the YouTuber has taken data at the time of writing the program, but I don't find that challenging, because at the runtime if you take the input, that will be more great, and as you can see over here, these kind of things will be addressed at that occasion. But if you are just taking the input at the time of writing a program, of course these challenges won't be there. Got it? And in real life application you cannot take anything beforehand. It will be given by the user at runtime. So this is something what you need to a large extent. So since this particular element is a div element, so for that reason we have a special class called HTML div element. So you can identify that each of these has got, each of the DOM is been represented by specific type of class. So the reference got created over here. Now we are seeing that I'm just doing a small checking over here just to ensure that yes, these DOM element is actually existing. I know it's there, but just for the sake of verification I did this. Now comes the most important line that we always come across any object-oriented programming. In general, what we say that this is the line where the object gets created. That's true. That is very much true. But the object is created where? If you look at this line has got two segments. One the left part, the other one is called right part. The left part is where you are creating a reference that actually created inside the stack memory. And this is a line where you create an object that exists inside the heap memory. So you are creating an object of the type class, and that object exists inside the heap memory. The address of that object which is there in the heap memory, that what you are assigning to this particular reference which is created inside the stack memory. So that means while you're executing this line, there are basically two memories are associated. On the left hand side we have a reference. Since this is a name, this is a reference that created inside the stack memory. But what this reference will contain? Well, it will contain the address of that object which is created inside the heap memory with the help of the new keyword. So when you're creating the object, that's the time when the constructor gets called. So this constructor will be called right at that point of time. Got it? So with the help of with the help of constructor, the object is getting created inside the heap memory. Please remember this. The address of that heap memory is assigned to the reference that exists inside the stack memory. That's how actually it works. Okay. So this portion will work immediately when the page will get loaded in the browser, but the operation will take place only when user clicks on the submit button. So when the user will fill up the data as given over here, and after that the user will click on the submit button, then this portion will be getting executed. As you can see, form.add event listener. So listener will wait until the user clicks on the submit button, then only it's going to execute the portion of the code that you can see right now. So e.prevent default will prevent the loading of the page. It will restrict the page from getting loaded. And now what we have to do, we already have the form with us. This form element is with us, so we will be able to identify the respective DOM and pick the data and store them individually in the variables, and they are all string type, as you can see right over here. So this is my form reference. So form dot element named item, and each of this DOM element has got name. See over here, I am not using any ID attribute over here, because in context to TypeScript it will be the name attribute that will be used to identify the respective DOM elements. Got it? So here I have a name that is called first DOM element, I have an email, second DOM element, and age as a third DOM element, and individually they have been identified over here. But this identification is not enough. You also need to tell them that look, this is going to be of the type HTML import element. So that means in this particular program, in this section of the event listener, you have come across three type of element. One is HTML form element, the second one is HTML div element, and the third one is HTML import element. You have to be very careful about this, because these are all going to be implemented in context of TypeScript. So once you have identified that particular DOM, now you are telling pick the data up, and in case if there is a blank space at the beginning of the word or at the end of the word, remove those blank space and then store it inside this variable. The same happens for the email as well. but in case of age it's going to be a number. So for that reason I have to do a typecasting, and that is called parseInt, and there where the input gets converted into a number and gets stored inside the age variable. If you look over here, also I have taken the input type as number, so I need to do this typecasting. This is very important, and after typecasting the value will get stored inside this variable. Now we want to ensure that all these three variables have got data inside. So for that reason I am just doing this particular verification just to ensure that yes, each of these DOM element has got data. If any one of the any one of the variable, if data is not there, look at the statement over here, exclamation is there, it means not. If name do not have data, or email do not have data, or is not a number, is the content of the variable, then in that case this alert will get fired, and after that the control will terminate from this particular function. Otherwise we are going to give a call to my setter method. I told you inside the user interface, user class, I have a method called import who is going to accept data that is coming from the user. So name will come to this variable, email will come to this variable, and age will come to this variable respectively, and then it will assign the value to these respective properties, and this particular function is not going to return any value. For that reason it is called void. So that's how the setter method got invoked. Got it? And now we are going to give a call to my display, which is like a getter method, but this display will have a string interaction over here. Means it's a string because I have given a string interpolation operator over here, but actually it contains HTML code that will be rendered inside the div tag. And for that reason here I have a div tag which I have already initialized right over here. Inside that div tag, using that property called inner HTML, the entire thing will be displayed. Got it? Once it is displayed, then I will blank the input form so that I can go for a fresh input, and the cursor will appear on the very first DOM element. So I have explained the entire document.addEventListener, the exact same thing I have done also in this particular file. There is no change in that, but the actual change will appear in context to this one, the interface. So I believe what you can understood from up to now, that how exactly a class is going to work, a constructor is there, a setter method is there, a getter method is there, and how exactly you are going to take the input from the user through HTML that will pass on to TypeScript, and then the transpiler will convert this TypeScript into JavaScript. Well, that's not my headache. My role is to write the program in TypeScript taking user input. That is what I am more interested. The rest, the compiler itself will do the work. So that is how this particular program goes. Now let's move on to this program and see the difference over here. Firstly, in this particular program there was no concept of inheritance. This is something very important. You are doing object-oriented programming, and if you do not have inheritance, somewhere it is not going to utilize the full potential of OOPs. So for that reason you have to come up with inheritance. And how do you do that? Well, the best way to start is to go for interface. So what I did is that I create an interface by the name called iUser. So naturally this question will come, that what is an interface? Or the interviewer may ask you the question how interface and class differs. Both are very crucial. By the end of this particular video you will have a clear understanding of both the question. So let me tell you what is interface. Look at this code snippet. Can I say like this? An interface is a container that holds properties and it holds abstract methods. I repeat, interface is a container that holds properties and it holds abstract methods. I have used the word methods over here, that means it can have multiple methods. And why did I use the word abstract? Look at this particular method. The method has a declaration, but where is the definition? Where is the body of the method? That is missing, and that is called abstract method. So when you are writing interface, you are not supposed to define the body of the method. You just meant to declare the method. Please follow the statement. It's very important. So interface is a container that is going to have properties, and it will have method that has got declaration but has got no definition. And same I have done in this case. Here I have got a setter method that is going to take parameters from the user input and it will not return anything. Whereas I have a getter method that is going to take the input, will take the input from the from the previous code or the function and then pass on to the HTML. So that's the reason we have got a string over here as a return type for this particular display, just like the way we saw over here. See, it is not taking any input, but it's returning the data that was already been provided by the class itself. The same thing what I'm doing right over here. Okay, a similar thing I'm doing right over here. So here comes the code. So just keep it in mind that interface is a container that contains properties and it contains abstract methods. Since it contains abstract methods, somebody has to define this method, right? Otherwise, what is the utility? And that brings us to class. So class is responsible to implement the interface. You can come up with a very simple example. Like for example, think like this way. Your parent had a dream that their kid would be a doctor or engineer or some good citizen of India. Alright? So that's their thought. That thought has to be put in reality. So you have to implement what they have thought. So if your parent thought that you would be doctor, then you have to follow all the steps, all the measures that will ensure that you will become a doctor. If your parent thought that you are going to be an engineer, that's just a thought. They are not putting that in reality. They are not converting the thought into action. You have to do it. So let's consider your parent to be an interface, and class user is you yourself, who knows how to give the definition of these abstract methods. Okay, so interface is just a thought, not a reality. And since it's a thought, not a reality, that's the reason why you cannot create an object of the interface. Yes, you rightly heard. You cannot create an instance of interface because it's just a thought. A thought will not make you a doctor in reality, right? So for that reason, it's a big important question that when you are defining interface with that of a class, in context to interface, you are just creating abstract methods, so you cannot create an object of an interface. You can create an object of class only. Please keep this thing in mind. And that's the reason why we are using the word called implements, not extend. Had this been a class A and class B, B is extending class. That means class A already knows what to do. But in interface, it's not defined how to do that, action is not stated. So you have to do that. That's the reason why the implements keyword is there. This is the English word implement, because you're implementing someone's plan into reality. Got it? So class user is implementing interface, this interface. So that's a keyword that you have to use in case of inheritance. Again, I have defined the same property which I have mentioned over here because I need to accept the data from the user that will be coming through this add event listener. Since it's an interface, there will be no object. For that reason, constructor is missing an interface. So there will be no constructor in case of interface because you cannot create an object of interface. So constructor will be there in context to class only. So whatever input user will give, well, first I will create the object. The time when I will create the object, at that point of time I will not pass any data from the user. If I come over here, I will show you. See over here, I'm creating an object. At that point of time, I'm not passing any data from the user. For that reason, these properties, these parameters are blank. So I'm basically assigning a blank value to this properties, to these members. So the time when I created this member, they were not initialized. So you can say with the help of the constructor, you are basically initializing these properties. Yeah, I know I'm doing it with a blank value. That's fine. At least initialization has been done. And object creation has been done successfully. So if you look at this line, here is something very interesting. Please take a note of this line. What I have done, here I'm creating, as I said in the previous, over here also, that this line has got two parts. On the left hand side, I'm creating a reference inside the stack memory, which is of type IUser, which is of type interface. So you can create a reference of type interface, but you cannot create an object. The object is created only on basis of class, because object will give a call to constructor. This object actually exists inside the heap memory. The address of that object is assigned to this particular variable that exists inside the stack memory. So over here, two memories are involved, and this is very important connectivity that you must remember, and that's what you have to tell in the interview. When you are writing this line, you have to make it very clear. The left hand side talks about the reference variable. Please follow the word. Don't just say it's a variable. It's not an integer or string variable. It's an interface. It contains a lot of things. So you have to use the right word, that is called reference. So I'm creating a reference inside the stack memory, and the reference name is called user, which is of type interface. So interface I can use to create a reference, but I cannot create an object of interface because constructor is not there. So when I'm writing this part of the line here, I'm giving a call to the class. With the help of new keyword, I'm creating an object, and the object is giving a call to constructor. The property will be assigned with a blank value, I mean a string, null value, or an empty string, and that address of that object is assigned to the reference variable that exists inside the stack. Please follow this particular section multiple number of times so you are well aware about what I am saying exactly, and that's how you have to define the word, right? And as usual, like what I have defined over here, the same thing. I'm taking the input from the user. First I'm identifying the DOM element, and then I'm checking whether this DOM has got any value or not, I mean this variables has got any value or not, and then I'm giving a call to my setter method using this particular reference. I'm giving a call, and the input will come over here. Whatever input I have given, that will get assigned one by one in these properties that exist inside the class. And then finally I'm giving a call to my display method, so the response will come in the form of interpolation that has been done over here, and all the variable, I mean the properties, will be like over here I'm picking up the data from the respective property and passing it as a value to this entire string interpolation, and eventually the result will come and will be stored inside the div element, which is right over here, the empty div tag. And then finally I will clear the form, and then I will put the cursor on the very first DOM element so that I can give a fresh new input. I know you would love to see the program execution. Don't worry, here is that. So this is how the HTML page would look like. So the HTML page which I have got over here, this is the HTML page. Because of that you are seeing the Bootstrap form that you can see right over here. So I have got 3 DOM elements, as you can see, name, email and age, and a button. So let me give an input over here. Well, I love my name, so let's go with that name called Swaroop, and email ID is swaroop@gmail.com, and I am 75 years old. And if I click on the submit button, what happens? The moment I click on the submit button, it gives a call to the TypeScript. The control will come right over here, and the DOM element already got loaded. You know, this particular DOM element already got loaded. I can show you even the constructor already got initialized. Before I click the button, I can show you even that also. If you see over here, see constructor. Let me reload the page once again. See, immediately when I reload, the constructor has been called automatically. I told you that this particular DOM element will get executed immediately when the page gets loaded on the browser. The only thing that will not happen is this particular portion of code will not execute because it will wait till the users click on the submit button. Please follow this video a number of times so that you are well versed with how to answer these kind of questions, and these are all the hotcake for interview. So let me give my input now. Swaroop, email is swaroop@gmail.com, and finally my age is 75 years. I'm pretty young. Click on the submit button. As I do that, bingo, the data comes in the form of card, Bootstrap card, as you saw in the display function. So this is what the display function was talking about. Let me reduce the code over here so that you can see this was a portion of the display function. So if I click on the display, this is the card that was responsible to display the entire thing, and the display came where? The display came inside the div tag which I have created right over here. There was an empty div tag where the data was actually been shown, and that's how this particular card has been displayed. So by the end of this video, I'm sure if you have seen this video number of times, you will be very confident about how class and interface and inheritance with the user input works on TypeScript. Well, this is just a beginning of few videos I will be making in TypeScript, and this is a very starting one. I know I started with a bit advanced level topic. At the end of the day, when you're working on TypeScript, definitely you are an advanced guy and you would love to work on these kind of application rather doing some basic fundamental programs that you will get a lot in this platform. Okay, so that's all in this video. Thank you so much. Have a nice time.